You're listening to a DM podcast.
We would like to acknowledge and give thanks to the traditional owners of the land we record this podcast on, the Yagara and Turrbal people,
and their continued connection to the land and waterways on which we meet.
Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Sportish. My name is Georgie Trickett. And that sound is the sound of Libby not being in the studio. Unfortunately, Libby is not able to join us today, which is very sad, because there is nothing we like to do more than talk sport each week. And we were very excited to be talking about Oscar Piastri's win over the weekend, which I was alerted to thanks to my Grilled app, which messaged me to tell me that because Oscar Piastri had got pole position over the weekend, I could get a discounted burger. And I thought, wow, we have come a long way in motorsports, that I'm aware of Oscar's placement on the grid for the final because of my Grilled app. He obviously went on to win in China, which is phenomenal. Lando came second, George Russell came third. There were a whole lot of disqualifications because people had cars that were too light. I don't know how they go about doing that. But anyway, there will be more to come on that, I have no doubt. We also were hoping to talk to you about Gout, the incredible Brisbane athlete who is just sending records tumbling at the moment with his brilliant performances on the track. We will still come back and talk to you about that at some point. In the meantime, Channel 7 has done a whole 1-hour episode about Gout. You can go and check it out on their Spotlight program. Highly recommend. Today's episode is going to be a little bit different because obviously I don't have Libby here to talk to, but I'm so excited that I do have a guest. To give you some background on this, I was lucky enough to be a guest to the Queensland Reds last weekend for their match against the New South Wales Waratahs, a sort of state of origin in the rugby sense, and for their women's match. And it was oh my goodness, it was such a good match. So competitive, so entertaining, such a good sports product. And I got talking to some of the people behind the Reds about what they're doing out there. And it was so exciting to hear about the fact that this is the proposed home, Ballymore, which has been around forever. Ballymore's a stadium that I remember going to as a teenager. You would go to the corner, you'd have a fob chain on. There was a very set, uniform when you went to watch the rugby. I'm embarrassed to say we all wore it. It involved deck shoes, which I hear are coming back. I know fob chains are back. I don't even know where mine is. But that was my last experience of Ballymore. So to come back last weekend and see what they've done with the place was unreal. This is the proposed venue for rugby sevens for the Olympics. And if it gets signed off, this would be the first Olympic teams. The women's sevens team would be the first Olympic team to move to Brisbane and to sort of set themselves up in Brisbane since the games were announced. So it's a pretty big deal. They've done an incredible job there, and they now have a facility there that is ready to host Super W, which is rugby, NRLW, which is rugby league, and A-League women. They want to become a home for women's rectangle sports. And I think it was just so brilliant to see an organisation that's decided to position themselves for a women's game and was really proud about having a really great venue that could service and be a really great heartland for women's sport. It's something you don't hear of very often. Everyone talks about whole codes and whole sports, but so rarely do you hear about someone in Australia owning a position around women's sport. And it was just a breath of fresh air. So after going to the rugby, after telling Libby about it, which Libby was like, rugby for me sits on a lower ranking than cricket. And you all know how Libby feels about cricket. So I'm now on a mission to change her views on rugby because it is such an exciting game that is doing great stuff around women's sport. You only have to look at Ilonah Maher to see the changes that are happening there. Ilonah Maher is the most recognisable player in rugby in the world, and she's a female. She's doing more for the game than any of the men are at the moment, and it's certainly changing the funding narrative in the US. It's having an impact on the UK, where she's recently gone and played. And you can see when you talk to people about rugby, how there's this recognition that it could be that the women's game has a really big role to play in keeping this sport alive. I'm so excited about our next guest. Her name is Jemma Bemrose. She is the co-captain of the Queensland Reds. She is the youngest that we've had in quite some time at the age of 22. She lives on the Gold Coast and she's taken on the position with Ivania Wong, who is the most experienced player that the Queensland Reds have at the moment. She's played every single match of the Super W since it started in 2018. And she is an absolute joy as well. Welcome, Jemma.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Now, you are one of the youngest ever female captains for the Reds, and you're actually doing that in a co-captaincy capacity. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I'm co-captains with Avania Wong, who is a highly esteemed Reds player. She's had 40 caps as of last weekend against the Brumbies, and it's been a huge honour to work closely with her and her experience. Obviously, I guess in the co-captaincy role, we just collaborate and work together. And obviously I'm very new to this sort of environment. Even in like club rugby, I haven't really been in huge leadership roles or captaincy roles. So it's definitely something I'm really learning. So to have her alongside me has been huge, just like her experience in rugby, but also her life experience and her leadership experience. It's taught me a lot of things. So definitely very, very blessed to be in the position that I'm in and learning along the way with somebody like her, and also the senior players and the senior leaders in our group has really been huge for me and my progression, I guess, as a leader and also in rugby.
It's a really modern approach to captaincy, and one that when I spoke to Libby about it, it was exciting to see, because being captain puts so much pressure on one individual, and to share it and to learn and to bring different things to the jobs is just
100%.
such a modern way to do it. It really speaks to the tone that the Reds have adopted, and certainly from what I saw last weekend, it's like there's been this real evolution of women's sport in Brisbane that's just gone about quietly, and then to go and see it happening, it is quite extraordinary. Tell me about the vibe at the Queensland Reds and what it's like to be in a facility that has really been developed with the women's game in mind.
I mean, it's great. I think like the vibe in general amongst the girls, like I haven't quite been part of such a tight-knit group. We're very passionate and we're all for the team. I think that's our culture. We're all in. And I guess like at the Reds, we're quite nurtured there and we're quite fortunate, especially with the facilities that we do have, the gym and the recovery and the fields. You know, they're great fields. It's a great facility. So I think that we're very lucky and we're well nurtured there. I think it's nice to be, appreciated. And I think that as a group, the vibe's great. We get along really well and we look after each other. And I think that's really important, especially in like women's teams in, male dominated sports. So, yeah.
How did you get into rugby, Jemma? Because my understanding is you're from the Gold Coast and you grew up doing that.
Yeah.
So was there a big rugby presence for you on the Gold Coast, and how did you end up being the captain of the Reds?
Not really, no. So I was always a touch player. I came from a touch football background. I've played since I was 8 or 9, and that was always my sport. I didn't really venture out of it. But yeah, it was in high school. I was in year 9 or 10 and one of the girls wanted to make a sevens team, and that was after the Commonwealth Games. So I think, we got exposure there because it was on the Gold Coast and sevens was obviously a part of the Commonwealth Games, but I didn't know anything about it until after. And she was just like, oh, I want to make a sevens team. And I was like, oh, okay, well, touch isn't available. So, okay, I guess I'll do it and I'll have a go. And then it kind of just carried on from there. The coach at my school was also a coach of the club. So I played sevens at a club for Friday nights, and then it progressed to 15s for me as I got a bit older. And then, I haven't really looked back. And it was my first year at the Reds last year. And then, here I am captaining, which is obviously huge and very different and very fast. But I wouldn't change it for the world.
You mentioned the pathways that sevens create into 15-a-side rugby. I know that the rules have recently changed where the Australian sevens women can now play as part of the Super Rugby tournament. What impact has that had on the 15s game?
Obviously, sevens is quite big, especially in the women's game. And like I say this to everybody, any way somebody can get into 15s or even union or sevens or anything, any way to grow the sport, I encourage. So I think for a lot of girls, sevens is a really good pathway to start into, but sometimes it doesn't always tick all the boxes for you and your stature. I think 15s is often quite welcoming to different body types and different skill sets. For me, it definitely wasn't something that I could continue forever or achieve at a high level. So transitioning into 15s really suited me. Obviously exposure in any way is good. So sevens exposure has been great. And the transition of the sevens girls this year, they've fit right in. So it's been really, really good to see and also have them on board, especially with their world-class experience. So yeah, it's been really, really good.
So during the Paris Olympics, we all became a lot more aware of Ilonah Maher. And for those who hadn't been following her, that was this big lift-up moment where she was a name that everyone could speak about. And now she's the most recognisable personality for rugby in the world. And that's in both the men's and women's game.
Yeah.
What impact do players like Ilonah have at the grassroots level here on Australian rugby?
I just think that having a household name makes a difference and it puts rugby on the map, you know what I mean, in any way. So social media is huge now, there's 12-year-olds that are on Instagram and on TikTok. So, young kids seeing Ilonah and her influence and also just how she carries herself. She's such a good name and a good person to represent rugby. So I think it has a huge influence on grassroots. It encourages kids to have a go and see what rugby is like. So having her as a face to rugby is huge and it's great, especially as a woman in the sport.
Is it the case that as Reds players, you would go and look and play for international clubs? Is there much? I know that I've seen other players transfer and move and play different seasons. Is that something that's open to the Australian rugby girls? And is it something that they're looking to do? Or is Australia really a heartland and a home for women's rugby?
There's a few girls in our team that do that currently. Laurie Kramer and Charlie Jacoby, they spent half the year in the UK playing rugby and then they flew over for our pre-season. So it's definitely something you can make rugby a full-time gig. So you can go over, play your footy in their season and then come back home and play it in our season. So it's definitely something that is quite common in the game. There's definitely a few girls that go over, especially to the UK or Japan or somewhere like that, and play their rugby overseas as well.
I think you make a really interesting point there that they can go overseas and make it a full-time role because this isn't a full-time job for you at the moment. This is, would you refer to it as a semi-professional type?
Yeah, definitely semi-professional, part-time. Yeah.
So what else do you do to make ends meet in your life? What are your other jobs that you're taking on board? Because your season goes for a couple of months, maybe 3 months?
Yep. Yeah, so I commit from November to pretty much the end of April to rugby. So I'm up in Brisbane at the moment 4 times a week, but I'm still working in between. I'm a disability support worker, so my hours are super, super flexible and I'm really fortunate that it's super flexible with my hours. And I have 3 clients and they're all brilliant and they love my rugby and they, cheer me on from home. So I'm very, very lucky with the job I do have because I know that there's a lot of girls who obviously work full-time hours, 9 to 5 or 8 to 4 and then go straight to the footy field and train and on top of that they have families and kids and other commitments. That's my other job which I love and I absolutely adore the job that I do have, but rugby is also a priority for me, so it is hard balancing both. It's hard, but I enjoy the challenge, I guess.
And because you are in that semi-professional capacity, are you talking to I guess, your support staff about extra things you have to do to prevent from injury? So I guess you're not in that sort of environment where you're regularly getting the hits and the runs and all that sort of thing. There's a level of, higher risk because it is in that part-time capacity. Do you change your approach because of it?
Not really, but I could see how some people might have to. My job is quite active day to day when I'm not training, and I guess I'm quite used to moving my body. But if you're working at a desk job for 8 hours and then you're going to train, there's that risk that you might be injured just because you haven't been as mobile maybe throughout the day. But our SNCs and the staff at the Reds are usually pretty on top of that stuff and our loads and managing us appropriately to make sure that we don't get injured, especially because our season is quite short. It's really important that, we protect our bodies as much as we can to play the 5 rounds or whatever it may be that we need to.
Jemma, what does rugby look like at the grassroots level for girls these days?
I haven't been there for a long time, but considering all the girls that come to Ballymore, I think that it's still thriving and it's going quite well. I know that there's lots of youngins that come to our games and they play at half time, and I speak to a lot of parents that talk about rugby and idolise us and say, you know, they're going to be in a Reds jersey soon. And so I think that it's a thriving aspect. And like you said, like with media and stuff, I just hope that it keeps growing and our exposure as well. I think the media this year has been really good at exposing the socials to women's rugby. I think they've really upped their game this year, especially in the Reds Instagrams and stuff. So I hope that it just keeps progressing, but I think it's still thriving. I mean, where it was when I first started at 15 to where it is now is huge, like the progression there. So, and that's only been 5 or 6 years, really. So I just hope that it keeps progressing in the direction that it is.
Well, I can certainly say that having been there last weekend and looked across the crowd, it was one of the most engaging groups of people I've ever seen. They were so invested in the game. It was such a good game.
It was, wasn't it?
You guys played so well and you were so unlucky to just lose the momentum in the second half.
Yeah.
What I saw was an amazing, really accessible product for families, like a really accessible venue, a really accessible time, a really great game to follow. And I think as someone who stood on the sidelines a lot watching rugby as a kid and never was invited to play and was always told that I wouldn't be able to play, to then see this generation of women just absolutely taking the ball up the field and dominating and showing a whole generation of girls what it could look like to play sport, what they could look like. I think that is so incredibly powerful. And we really appreciate the fact that you guys put on such a great game for the kids and for the grown-ups to relive their memories.
Yeah, it was an awesome game, wasn't it? It was like from the first minute to the 80th minute, it was just super intense and very back and forth. I think I said to the girls, it was honestly unfortunate that the score didn't really reflect the game at hand because it was very back and forth. You know, they just iced the moments that they had and we probably didn't execute when we needed to. But yeah, it was such a good contest and like I felt it even in the game, the intensity and having the crowd there, I think really, really helped us just stay in the fight. It's always such a cool moment after games when I get to meet the kids and realize the actual influence that I guess I do have and also the team has. I think you don't realize it until little kids are saying your name that, you know, you think that you're not having an impact on their lives, but they know exactly who you are and they want a signature and they want a photo. So it's really, really cool to kind of see the influence, I guess, that the women's program and rugby has on young girls and also their parents, you know, bringing them along and wanting them to see what rugby is about and hopefully, I guess, play when they're older at that level.
Jemma, it's been an absolute privilege to have you in the studio today. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for listening to this little episode of Sportish, Little Sportish, we might call it. We really appreciate all your support, all your listens, for sending this on to your friends. Just by doing that, you help people find us, and we really appreciate that. We'll be back in your ears in some capacity next week. See you then. Bye.